So can the Toy Story franchise really continue after Toy Story 3? Yes, it Canada. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the fourth installment in the Toy Story franchise, Pixar's 2019 animated adventure, Toy Story 4. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, ranked lists, and trailer reactions. All of my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. Toy Story 4 stars the vocal talents of Tom Hanks, Tim Allen, Annie Potts, and Tony Hale, and was directed by Josh Cooley. It tells the continuing story of Woody, Buzz, and the rest of the gang now that they're Bonnie's toys. Bonnie takes the group on an RV road trip, and after getting separated from the rest of the toys, Woody encounters an old friend while coming to terms with his purpose in this new stage of his life. Toy Story 4 is a movie that I was both highly anticipating and dreading. I've always had a very deep connection with the Toy Story franchise. The first movie came out when I was 5 years old, so these characters have been a part of my life for almost the entirety of my life. I quite literally grew up with these movies, so I have an almost protective tendency when it comes to them. If you saw my review for Toy Story 3, you know how skeptical I was of that movie when it was first announced. The second film had certainly left itself open for more, but the 11-year gap had me concerned that Toy Story 3 wasn't gonna have the right feel and that it was somehow gonna tarnish the previous films. But then it was released, and I absolutely loved it. And maybe most importantly, it served as an ending. It wrapped things up so emotionally and so perfectly that its finality felt right. 9 years later, we have Toy Story 4. Much like just about everybody else, I was extremely skeptical when the film was first announced. It seemed so ridiculous to me. You know, maybe skeptical is too nice of a word for how I initially felt. I was kind of mad. I thought that Toy Story 3 had provided the perfect ending to the story and these characters. A fourth film seemed entirely unnecessary and unwarranted. As we got closer to the release date, I wasn't angry anymore, but I was still concerned. Even though the trailers didn't do anything to get me excited, I had no doubt that this was going to be a good movie. Pixar really hasn't made a bad film, and I've certainly never been disappointed by a Toy Story movie. But as much as I wanted to see more of these characters that I love and grew up with, I was really concerned about what the continuation of the story would mean for the emotional impact of Toy Story 3. Like I said, the ending of that film was just such perfect closure, and I didn't want anything to cheapen it or dampen its importance. So now that I've seen Toy Story 4, I've realized that I just need to stop being skeptical about Toy Story movies. While I don't know if I'd go as far as to say that this was a necessary film, I do think that it fully justifies its existence. And regarding my biggest concern, and the concern I think a lot of people shared, this movie doesn't take anything away from Toy Story 3. The emotional impact of that ending isn't diminished at all, and in fact, Toy Story 4 is able to provide us with things we didn't know we wanted, or perhaps needed. This movie is definitely Woody's story. The other three films were also largely focused on his character, but this one focuses so much on him that the rest of the toys are really pushed to the side. Characters like Jessie, Ham, Rex, and the Potato Heads certainly get their moments, but not nearly to the degree that they've gotten in the previous films, especially Toy Story 3. Even Buzz has his most limited role in a Toy Story film. He's involved a decent amount with the main plot and has some very funny and heartfelt moments, but his relationship with Woody, which has been so central to the entire franchise, feels like an afterthought at times here. While it's a little disappointing to see so many of the core characters get pushed to the background, the time we get to spend focusing on Woody is wonderful. His character has developed so much over the years, and yet he still struggles with some of the same challenges we've seen him face before. His identity and purpose, his sense of responsibility and duty, and his difficulty with letting go. He's still deeply affected by Andy and the events of Toy Story 3, so his character especially follows a very natural progression of development. Woody's character development is aided by a number of other characters, perhaps most notably Forky. Forky's a character who, based on the trailers, I thought I was gonna hate. but surprisingly, he was actually pretty good and not nearly as annoying as I had anticipated. His presence introduces some interesting existential questions within the Toy Story universe, and although his actions are primarily played off as humor, there are some definite darker metaphorical undertones that are at play there. But Forky's true role in this film is that of a MacGuffin. He's a plot catalyst and a motivational element for Woody, working to further Woody's character. Another motivational element is the villain of this film, who's easily the most interesting and dynamic of all the antagonists in the Toy Story franchise. Another character that I've gotta talk about is Bo Peep. Up until now, she's been the most underutilized main character in the franchise. She's always just been there. In Toy Story 1 and 2, she served as a voice of reason and a minor love interest, but never had any significant role in the plot. Even Andy only ever used her as a damsel in distress when he played. By the time Toy Story 3 rolled around, she was already gone, so we never got any development for her character or really any explanation as to what happened to her. Well, in Toy Story 4, we get both. And more. We get to see exactly what happened to her, and that sequence in this movie really adds to the emotion of Toy Story 3. The scene in that movie, when she's brought up, takes on an even more poignant tone than before, as does Woody's adamancy about all the toys needing to stay for Andy. Bo might literally be made of porcelain, but she's certainly no damsel in distress here. In fact, she's a complete badass. She's so cool and so strong, but still adds to the emotional core of the story, especially with regard to Woody. As with all three previous Toy Story films, this movie is able to balance its deeper themes and humor exceptionally well. I would argue that this might be one of the more comedic installments in the franchise. There's tons of funny and witty dialogue, as always, some great situational humor, and the introduction of new characters like Forky and the Canuck with all the luck, Duke Kaboom, greatly added to the humor as well. The first film was the first ever computer animated feature film, and Pixar is at a point now where some of their animation almost looks photorealistic. The textures are phenomenal, and the attention to detail is amazing. Just look at the decals on Buzz. There's this one shot of some characters under a car in the rain that's so cinematic that you forget you're watching an animated movie. In 1995, a 5-year-old me, having just watched Toy Story for the very first time, walked out of that theater full of wonder, excitement, and love for a bunch of animated toys. I never would have imagined that 24 years later, I'd be doing the same thing. Just as with its predecessors, Toy Story 4 is an emotional film. Although I didn't completely lose it like I did by the end of Toy Story 3, I was definitely tearing up at the end of this film. Toy Story 3 was the perfect end to the trilogy, but Toy Story 4 is a wonderful and fitting epilogue. And if past experience has taught me anything, if we ever get a Toy Story 5 announcement, I'm gonna be fully on board right from the start. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number one has gotta be the themes. The Toy Story franchise has been surprisingly deep and layered since its inception, and Toy Story 4 is no exception. While never quite packing the emotional punch that Toy Story 3 did, this movie still tackles some thematically important and heavy stuff. The themes of identity and finding one's purpose in life have been central to the entire franchise, with each film exploring the concepts in a slightly different way. Here, we see Forky's existential crisis, but we also see the struggles that Woody's facing as well. Toy Story 2, and especially 3, delved very deeply into the idea of growing up, and Toy Story 3 provided closure for Andy, but it's clear here that Woody hasn't found that same sense of closure. He has this very parental feel to him, both in how he talks about Andy and in his sense of duty. And the emotional journey that Woody takes, as well as the natural evolution we see in his character, is definitely the highlight of this movie. Pro number two is the villain. I've got to say that this is easily the most dynamic and fleshed out antagonist we've had in a Toy Story film. I'm not going to give away who it is, though you can probably guess from the trailers, but this character has a surprising amount of depth to them. They're introduced as an unsettling, almost horror movie-like villain. In fact, the whole antique shop setting frequently has a horror movie vibe to it that really brought me back to the creepiness of Sid's room in Toy Story 1. And for young kids, I'd say that this is probably even scarier than that was. But whereas Sid was a very one-note villain, our antagonist here is multidimensional. They're formidable, but their motivations are also made clear, making for a very compelling villain. Pro number 3 is the animation. Pixar's always been at the top of the game, and each Toy Story movie has looked visually stunning when it was released. Toy Story 4 is no different. These characters have felt real for the last 24 years, and now they look real too. The textures, the expressions, the way they move, everything about these characters convinces you that they're truly alive. Even the backgrounds are astonishing. The level of detail that's on display here is mind-blowing. I remember thinking how amazing it was to see a scuffed up door in the background of a shot in Toy Story 1, but here, each speck of dust, each cobweb provides this movie with an amazing sense of reality. Combine that with some exceptionally cinematic moments of photorealism, and you've got one fantastically animated film. As far as the cons go, my issues with this movie are pretty minor, though I wouldn't quite consider them nitpicks. My biggest problem here is the sidelining of most of the original characters. Now, I understand why. This is most certainly Woody's story, so the focus is, unsurprisingly, on him. And I have no problem with that. I love Woody, and he's always been one of, if not the, favorite character of mine in Toy Story. But I can't lie, I was disappointed by how little time we got with the majority of the old characters. And not just how little screen time they had, but how inconsequential they were to the plot. Even Buzz takes a backseat for much of the film, and feels kinda dumb. He just didn't seem like the Buzz I've known for the last 24 years. My second con kinda jumps off that last one, and it's that there's this heavy reliance on some of the new characters. Some were great. The villain, Duke Kaboom, even Forky to an extent. And even though I'm pretty sure I'm in the minority here, Bunny and Ducky just didn't do it for me. They definitely had some funny moments, but that's all that they had. They were purely comic relief and had no real contribution to the plot or emotionality of the story, which seemed really weird for Pixar. They felt kinda out of place in a Toy Story movie, and I would have much rather seen the lengthy screen time that was devoted to them given to an old favorite like Jessie. I'm gonna give Toy Story 4 4.5 out of 5 paws. This was a surprisingly justified movie that doesn't take away from the emotional impact of Toy Story 3, but instead adds another new layer of dimensionality to Woody's character, while also maintaining the humor and adventure we expect from a Toy Story film. I would recommend Toy Story 4 to fans of the Toy Story franchise, but also more broadly to fans of Pixar. This is a movie that could be enjoyable to a Toy Story novice or young kid, but this is most definitely a movie intended for people who've been on this lifelong journey with Woody and Buzz. Toy Story 3 was the perfect end, but Toy Story 4 is an epilogue that provides a different sense of closure. If you liked Toy Story 4, I've obviously gotta recommend that you watch the rest of the Toy Story franchise. I mean, this wouldn't be a Toy Story review if I didn't. I think you'll especially enjoy Toy Story 2 because, like this film, it's one of the more comedic installments in the franchise and also involves splitting Woody up from the rest of the group. I would also recommend Incredibles 2 for another Pixar sequel that nicely balances adventure with the heavier themes regarding family and parenting. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Toy Story 4? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, do you hope that we get a Toy Story 5, or do you think this franchise has run its course? What would you most like to see in a Toy Story 5? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button, and if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it so you can see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.